Hi, in this video I want to systematize the Hebrew noun endings. Maybe you've seen a Hebrew noun here or there. Maybe you've seen a feminine singular here or a masculine plural there. In this video I want to tie it all together. What do Hebrew noun endings look like? So there are two basic states that a Hebrew noun can have. It can be in what's called the absolute state, which is kind of like all the nouns I know in English, or it can be in what's called the construct state. More on that in a second. But we're going to start with the absolute state because that's the one that's most familiar, that's like English, and we can handle that. Now, even here there's some stuff that English doesn't do. So for example, English doesn't have gender. We don't have masculine nouns and feminine nouns. And you probably know if you've had Spanish or French or some other language, this really isn't about sex, so to speak. This is more kind of an arbitrary thing that some languages do, where they say, oh, that word's feminine or that word's masculine. And it doesn't mean that they're female or male. It's just a kind of a habit, a custom, a convention. So don't try to understand it. You know, if something is actually a female, it probably is going to be feminine and vice versa. But generally, you should just say, this is like a game. I'm learning a new board game. And in this game, you have masculine pieces and feminine pieces on the board. So again, masculine, feminine. Singular, plural, we get that in English, right? Because there's one man or there are two men or there's a book and then there are books. We add an S to it. So we can see even in English, we change the ending of the word sometimes. Book, books. Or the middle of the word sometimes. So like man, men. So here are the basic forms of a noun in the absolute state. So in most languages, I'm sorry to say, the masculine gets pride of place. And so the basic vocabulary form, the nothing really added to it form, the starter form, the default form, the vocabulary based form, that's usually that's the masculine singular. And so I'll show you an example of one of them in a second. I can't tell you an ending because it doesn't have an ending. It's just the blah. Now, you may know, or you may not, that we can make a masculine singular word plural in many cases, most cases, by adding the ending im, hirik yod, mem. So like if El is one God, Elohim is gods, although that's a special one in the Hebrew Bible, right? That's one of the curiosities of Hebrew, the Hebrew Bible, that Elohim, even though it has a plural ending, is treated as a singular whenever it's talking about the God. Very interesting, isn't it? The feminine singular tends to be kamatz he. It's kamatz he. So if you see a kamatz he on the end of a noun, it's probably a feminine singular noun you're looking at. I'll give you an example in a second. Now if you're following my trek through Jonah, we have not yet seen one of these, but you've seen these other ones if you are. But this is the oat ending. And the oat ending is feminine plural. And so this is the way you take a word and put oat on the ending. And if it's a feminine word, this is the way it makes its feminine plural, probably. All right, so there are the I chopped off the word and gave you an artificial ending. You will never see these all by themselves in a text. They're always going to be attached to a noun. All right, let me give you some examples so it gets real. So here I've just shown you these endings. Here it is with the word for the masculine word king. So the word for king in Hebrew is melech. Melchizedek, king of righteousness. So Abimelech, my father is king. So a lot of the names have melech, some of the names at least in the Old Testament have melech on it. There's nothing added to this. It's just the basic form. It's masculine singular melech. Now, if you want to make it plural, you put im onto the end of it. So malakim is kings. Malakim is kings. So see, to make a masculine singular word plural, you add im onto it. Now, malka is actually a different word. I mean, it's obviously related, right? But it's not like I decided to take king and make it queen by adding a kamatz he on it. I don't think of it that way. It's a different word. It is related, yes, but melech is one word and malka is another word. But the kamatz he, you could have guessed what this word meant because we've got the letters of melech. and then you get kamatz he, a feminine singular ending on it. So this is the word for queen, malka. And then if you want to make it plural, you add the oat ending. Malakot is the feminine plural ending. Now, all of these are absolute. So this is masculine singular absolute. This is masculine plural absolute. This is feminine singular absolute. This is feminine plural absolute. What does that mean? It means just it's the normal kind of noun that we are familiar with in English. Okay, freeze that, pause the video and freeze that on your brain. And now something we don't have in English, and that's the construct state. If you've watched the video previously to this in my sequence, in my playlist, in my Udemy course, assuming I finish it, you'll know that if something is the construct state, you put the word of after it. And so if you have king and you put it in the construct state, then you would translate it king of. Now, let me tell you how the endings work for the construct. So again, the masculine singular is difficult because it doesn't add an ending. Most of the time, in order to make a masculine singular absolute noun into a masculine singular construct, that is, to take it from being king to make it king of, or some other version, some other word would actually work better. But basically, you suck the vowel out. What does he mean by that? Well, if something is the king of righteousness, for example, or the king of peace, or the king of Jonesboro, whenever you're doing that, that's kind of a phrase, right? Those words go together. King of peace. That's a kind of a unit of thought. And so when you're saying things together in Hebrew, I've said this before, you have to kind of save your breath for the end. Hebrew, the breath, you have to get all the way through those two words, king of peace. Those are two words in Hebrew. You got to get all the way to the end. And so you have less breath to give earlier on in the construct chain. It's called a chain. The king of peace, the king of John, of dawn, of lamps, or whatever. You can have a construct chain where this, of this, of this, of this, of this. And so when the emphasis in speaking will be on the final word. And so you have to save your breath as you're getting toward it. And so there's less vowel the earlier you are in a construct chain. And so what does that mean? Suck the vowel out. That's just my colloquial way of saying is that long vowels will tend to go and become shorter vowels. A kamatz is a long a patak is not as long, and then a katef patak is even less long, and a shava is even less long, if you watch my vowel video. And so the length gets sucked out, as it were, when a masculine singular word becomes construct. That is the way I think of it, at least. Now, if you're following these in series from Jonah, you know that sarayod is the masculine plural construct ending. And so if I want to say kings of peace, then I'm going to put this ending on the end of kings. And so the word of, because it's construct, of jumps out of it. There's no word for of in that case. You have to know that we're playing a game, right? It's the Hebrew game. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Well, when it's in the construct state, the game says, okay, here, I'm reading the card, construct state, add of after the word, okay? So when this ending is on a masculine plural, it becomes kings of or whatever, boats of, and so forth. Boat is usually feminine, so that's a bad example. Okay, we have not seen either of these in the text of Jonah yet, but I'll get you ready for it because we'll see it eventually, no doubt. So a patak tav is a way of making a so if kamatz he is the normal absolute, if it becomes patak tav, that tells you, oh, this is a feminine singular construct. The queen of peace would end in patak tav, and you put an of after it. Notice that it's short because constructs tend to go with short vowels. Now you might be saying, wait a minute, that looks familiar. Nothing happens to the feminine plural. The feminine plural absolute and the feminine plural construct look exactly the same. I'm sorry. You just have to use context, or the accents sometimes hit. Sometimes the accents will say, the word that comes after me is going with me. We're going out together. We're going steady. And so sometimes the accent is a hint that a word goes with the word that comes afterwards. But the feminine plural, absolute and construct look the same. So queens of peace, and queens, period, are both going to end in oat. Now, the reason for that is because this whole involve is a very long indeed. And what I mean is it's historically long. There are, believe it or not, there were languages before Hebrew. There were Semitic languages before Hebrew. And in the history of Semitic languages, whatever language turned into Hebrew, it had a long vowel for here. And so when these historically long vowels have come into Hebrew from the distant past, the archaic past, they're permanently long. The long is baked into them, so they're not going to go. They're not going to go short, and this is one of them. So this is a historically long vowel here. It's just I've been long when you were in diapers. You know, I've been long before you even existed. I've been in. Anyway, I'll stop. But this is going to be both the feminine plural absolute ending and the feminine plural construct ending. So here's an example. So here's what I just showed you. So what does it mean to suck the vowel out of melech, the masculine singular? Well, segols are already short. And so you can't tell again. I'm sorry. Sometimes you can't tell. Context is everything, right? This is a particular kind of word, by the way. It's called a segolet. But the segols aren't going anywhere. So the construct form of melech looks exactly the same as the absolute form of melech. Sorry. But we do see in the plural, malkei, this is kings of whatever comes next. So you can tell the masculine plural construct of king. Queen, remember malka, kamathe, was the feminine singular absolute. And so for the feminine singular construct, the vowel gets sucked out, the kamatz becomes a patak, a shorter a, and a tav is put on the end. Heys and tavs at the end of a word often signify a feminine word. So you can kind of have an intuition about heys at the end of a noun or tavs at the end of a noun, in this case, that it might very well be feminine. But the at is the feminine singular construct. So malkat here means queen of something. By the way, hiding in that segolet, hiding in a segolet is often an a vowel. So you might be thinking, you probably weren't, but you might be thinking, where did that a come from? Well, sometimes the segolets they're hiding the inner patak. Did I say hey? Inner patak. All right. So there's a patak. So malkat means queen of something. And then malakot, again, you can't tell just by looking at it whether this is absolute or construct because it has the same exact ending. But in a particular context, this could mean the queens of something. And like I said, that's a historically long whole involve. It ain't going anywhere. Well, this has been my attempt to systematize Hebrew noun endings. And if you watch this video 1,000 times, no doubt you'll have it memorized and annoy the people around you because you'll say things that they won't understand. This has been Hebrew Nouns.